Okay, so next up, what we're also trying to do with the program over the 3 days is to, introduce some unique aspects over the time. So there's different panel discussions, there's keynotes, there's the parallel tracks, but right now I have the pleasure of introducing the two artists that we've been working with. So at the Bonn Sustainable AI Lab, we have over the last 2 years been working with these two artists under a particular program, so the Art Science Residency Program. And this is something that's sponsored by Deutsche Telekom in association with Ars Electronica. And the idea here is that the Sustainable AI Lab is the scientific partner. So artists are invited to come to the lab to spend a week or a few days here and there to speak to the researchers, to discuss their own work, our work, and then they create an installation based on their perspectives and our perspectives. I don't at all want to give us too much credit. It's all the artists, really. It's them. But we are, just working together. And it's been an incredible experience in terms of how it's opened up our own minds. There will be a panel in the next 3 days, tomorrow, where we go further into this. So I won't say too much about it right now. But I'd like to invite the artists to come to the stage to explain the works that they have on display here over the next 3 days. So we have Irakli Sabekia, who is a Georgian designer and artistic researcher based in Amsterdam, a recent graduate of the Design Academy in Eindhoven. He has a background in sciences and visual communication. His installations, interventions, and interactive experiences explore the human position in relation to artificial and natural systems, engaging with politics, society, and technology. And so Irakli was the first resident that we had a year and a half ago, and then created just an incredible, mind-blowing piece for Ars Electronica, and we've invited Irakli to come back and to create another piece, which he will describe now, that will be on display. And we also have Špela Petrič, who is here with us. She's based in Amsterdam. Amsterdam-based new media artist who has been trained in the natural sciences and holds a PhD in biology, currently working as a postdoc researcher at the Smart Hybrid Forms Lab at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Her artistic practice combines the natural sciences, wet biomedia practices, performance, and critically examines the limits of anthropocentrism via multi-species endeavors. She envisions artistic experiments that enact strange relations to reveal the ontological and epistemological underpinnings of our biotechnological societies. I love it, beautiful. So I give the stage to you both, and we had said, 15 minutes for each of you to describe your pieces, but I should also say both of them are here over the next 3 days, and so please find them, find their pieces, talk to them, and engage with their pieces, because it's really exciting. So I leave it to the two of you. Irakli, maybe you start, yep.
Is it okay if I fold this down and, Marcus, can I fold this down and use my computer, or, no? Yes, I can? Okay, thank you. And I have a thingy, right? Thanks. Sorry. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Irakli Sabekia. I'm a designer and artistic researcher based in Amsterdam. My practice is focused on the human experience. I'm interested in human experiences of interactions with systems and the structures that are built around humans and the frictions that arise within these interactions. Often political and social topics come to the focus of the works, and I tend to focus on things or phenomena that I find somehow out of balance. I try to deal with the situations that arise by developing a method when I try to understand the system that I'm approaching as well as I can, and then basically build my world, my suggested world, from the existing pieces and variables that are present in the system. In the process of this, science and technology are some sort of impartial, rational tools that I can use to address topics that otherwise are sometimes eluding examination due to their complexity. The aim of my work is often to create an experience that connects me and the audience to the subject of my work, and seeking to highlight an aspect of reality that would otherwise remain unseen. In this presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about how I work, but also how this last project together with Ars Electronica and Sustainable AI Lab came together, and the kind of process and connections we established during this process. My collaboration with scientific institutions before has been a little bit one-sided. When I would approach the institution when I needed expertise in a certain topic. But this time was very different, because here I had unlimited access to the institution, and I could ask questions, and discuss my decisions, and having philosophers and scientists in the process of creating a work was a real privilege. And I even set up a desk in a lab for a little bit. It felt really good to have some fixed working hours. We worked on the project that Aimee mentioned, which was called the Archive of Spatial Knowledge. This was a digital platform addressing the issues of spatial justice. It was dedicated to, it was dedicated to collecting and preserving spatial and social memory of individuals who had been forcefully displaced from the areas of their origin. And it was creating a virtual layer of knowledge overlaid on a physical landscape where erased memory could exist in their original location in a virtual layer. We presented this work at the Ars Electronica Festival in September 2022. And after that, I was really excited later that year when the lab approached me with a proposal to start another project, which is unveiled on this conference. And we started collaboration on a project from scratch, and that was really exciting to me. I really wanted to use this opportunity to really build the project together. And how we started was I made interviews with every member of the lab to really understand their research trajectories, so I could find overlaps where we could, which could work as a starting point for projects. And in these interviews, some topics were recurring, and it started with the very first conversation with Aimee, and then later some of the researchers, they really, I heard it again and again, and I think it was Taylor in the end who really nicely summarized the two aspects of technology that were interesting or they found urgent, and this were materiality and legibility. And on the one hand, technology, many researchers were concerned that the general public did not think of digital products as something that would require a massive physical infrastructure, and therefore it was very easy for them to overlook the effects that it could have on the environment. A prime example of this would be probably the cloud, where it's somehow considered a very virtual sort of structure, but it's not often asked how much does this cloud actually weigh. On the other hand, there is some type of complex technology that is quite opaque, referred to as a black box, which of course makes it difficult to hold these systems accountable, and because we don't really understand or we have no access to the machinery underneath it. So both of these points really resonated with me, because addressing these would mean that I would need to unveil some sort of aspects of technology that were rendered invisible otherwise, and that's something that I like to do in my practice, and I like to address in my project. So I started from this point and quite soon narrowed down the topic to the internet, which was still quite broad, but what I was interested in it, I was interested in it because it is such a medium for any other technological transaction that we are participating in. And I started exploring its structure, its physical infrastructure, and sketching out maps and trying to understand how the signals, the data gets transmitted, and all kinds of infrastructural elements that go into it. And of course, all these infrastructure is used by many, but in fact they're owned by very few large corporations that develop them based on their own interest. And there we can really see how this disparity in how the technology is distributed in the world, it really reflects the complex power dynamics that exist within, in between the stakeholders in this field. So the situation, so I got interested in looking into this phenomenon a bit closely and trying to really find a way in which I could, and therefore then maybe my audience could really put their ear against the structure of the internet and really feel how that works. Because even though by numbers these disparities are quite obvious, there's not really many ways in which we can experience these experience this situation. So I started looking at the internet structure and kind of educating myself in networks from the very basics of structure of data packets, and mostly being interested in the kind of protocols that have to do with maintenance and regulation of the system, like the Internet Control Message Protocol, for example, which has this really simple command ping. It's a really basic way of sending a message to a remote device and expecting an answer and measuring how well you are connected to that device in a local or a remote network. In the very first experiments that I did, I started just addressing different devices or different networks around the world, and really soon found out that actually physical distance was not often reflected on the connection speed, which was kind of counterintuitive, but this phenomenon would repeat itself. And then I found that in the end I had an interesting kind of data collected, but I only had the numbers. It was not the way in which this could have been perceived by an audience was still to be somehow discovered. And my approach, kind of intuitively in the beginning, was to use sound, because sound is such a thing that we measure time with, to think about, like ticking of a clock, or in music we really understand the time intervals in sound very well. But the problem was in this approach was that the differences in milliseconds that are really important on the digital connection, for our ears, they're not really significant, and it's really hard to distinguish. And I was struggling with this a little bit, but at some point I remembered a concept that I learned from radio, a very low-tech idea of frequency modulation, where you basically use a carrier frequency as a blank slate and then modulate this frequency to produce a signal that actually carries information. So then how it would work in our case would be you would send out pings to a certain country, let's say 10 pings, and then assign to them a set frequency. And by the times they return back, you take these delay times and then alter these frequency accordingly. So even though we can't hear the differences in between the timing of the millisecond intervals, if you apply these changes to frequencies, our ears are quite sensitive to them. So you get a kind of a soundscape, and depending on how irregular these tones are from different countries, you can also sense how irregular the connection is. So for example, this is a connection sound from the US. Let's try to play this. So the first tone was the initial tone, and the other 10 were the returning tones. But you see there's very little difference because we're so well connected. Let's try Serbia. Just. Yeah, it's quite obvious, right? It's very different. So I did like this system because it really allows to hear both. You also hear the delay, but you also hear this irregularity of the tones. But I felt after this stage, one more step could have been done. And the other step was, once I gathered this information, and I had at this point created a piece that was connecting to 196 countries in the world and collecting the information, why not create an image of the world that reflects this? I found, oh, sorry, I didn't show these. These are the wavelengths for each country that I showed. But I found a series of maps that were trying to do this, and often these maps were overlaying the connectivity data over the existing conventional geographical maps. But what I thought could have been done here is not to represent the connection with some abstract lines, but rather to use the connectivity parameters to actually change the geography. So basically reshuffle the countries based on how well they are connected. So let's say we take all the countries, we take all their respective land surfaces, and we leave the land surfaces as constant. Also, can we just agree that the land surfaces of the countries should be constant? Just saying. It's okay. And we just reshuffle these countries, and we put the countries that are closer, better connected to us, closer, and the countries that are worse connected, further. What we get is kind of a strange map. We become enveloped with things, and then things become islands, and we have new continents and such. And that is basically how the network proximity atlas works. It is in two components. One component creates the soundscape of connectivity to all countries in the world, and the other component creates the atlas. There's one more thing that I want to add, because this work is kind of egocentric, because it measures the world from the point where it's measuring at the moment. This also gives an opportunity, because if you set up this installation somewhere else, it creates a different kind of perspective. And that's where it becomes an atlas rather than a map, because it has many different views and many different maps. Yes, I think that's it for the atlas of or the network proximity atlas. What a mouthful. Thank you very much. This is Madlubak Uradrebistus in Georgian. Now you can't say that you didn't learn anything new from this artist guy. Oh yeah, yes, I forgot to invite you. On the first floor, I don't know how to define this room, but if you come to the first floor, you'll see me there. I'm going to be there during the whole time, and the work is there doing its job. And I would love to talk to you and hear your opinions about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Yes. So I guess we're really into mapping these days. Artists making maps. Cartographies are always a political gesture, so I guess it's a way of reclaiming power a little bit. So yeah, I met Aimee and the wonderful lab here through open call by Ars Electronica, and I basically wrote a love letter, and I was so happy to be accepted, because I think that these topics are so pertinent, and yet for a layperson, they are kind of hard to access mentally, let alone physically enter the spaces where these decisions are made. So, in partnership with the AI, Sustainable AI Lab in Bonn, as well as the ELSA AI Lab in Northern Netherlands, we have embarked on a multi-year journey to explore how AI is implemented in the infrastructure of care. So I will just briefly tell you about how I got here. In artistic circles, I'm known as the plant artist, because I have been working with plants for almost 10 years now. And what drew me to plants was my complete ignorance of them. So I was absolutely plant blind, and I didn't get it why. I know that we are totally indebted to them. They are linked to the sun, and yet we marginalize them. They're always the scenery, and they're a living resource, and we treat plants as such. So I went on a journey through first the opus called Confronting Vegetal Otherness to unpack through artistic experiments what constitutes this relation to this vegetal other. So looking at ontologies, epistemologies, and finally also ethics. So this is a photo of a 20-year performance, or 20-hour performance called Scotopoesis, where I stood still trying to intercognate with Cress through a medium which I thought it would understand, that is the shadow, and finally ended up leaving an imprint. At that point, working with plants for so long, I got a little bit of planty on the brain as well, I guess. So when AI became a big thing, and a lot of funding also went into it, and artists are always drawn to opportunities of funding, because how else are we going to live? So let's not think about artistic autonomy as this ideal thing. We are all embedded in the economic models as well. So AI was a big thing, and I wasn't really interested in it because I'm personally more like a biophiliac. But after taking this challenge on and understanding it a little better, I was struck by something. So basically, the ontological marginalization that was happening to plants, when we look at them, we see them as pure surface, without interiority, without autonomy, without essence, they can be cloned, etc. So all of these properties, metaphysical ways of constructing the hierarchy of life, have been placing plants somehow opposite the cherished human. But if you look at how algorithmic systems in AI are parsing through the data that we create as humans, they are kind of viewing us in the same way as we view plants. Okay, so in terms of not really being interested in our personal lived experience, or sort of the behavioral surplus is mine, we're sort of fragmented and generalized. We become a statistical human, and that hurts. That hurts so much. So in that sense, this realization, in the eyes of the algorithm, we are all already plants, made me think about how this can not only be used as a way of, trying to rescue plants from the background to the level of the human, but to find ourselves in a common plight, and start making work from this, position where we are actually allies. In the epistemic injustice that is being thrust upon us. Okay, and I made Play in collaboration with a ton of people. It's basically a robot whose sole purpose is to play with cucumber plants in plant time. So it's trying to bridge not just the plant time, but also push AI towards the edge of what it is capable of, right? And of course recognize that plants feel joy, pleasure, they play, right? So it's not a game, it's really like ontological play. And with this insight, the next challenge really became what happens if you take this type of practice and go observe these systems which are technologically similar in actual situations where bodies are cared for. And because I said I already feel like plants and humans are one and the same in this respect, what if we did this comparatively and looked at automation of care in agriculture and the healthcare system? And it's kind of interesting because precisely the ethical presuppositions and the frameworks are so radically different, right? And that continues to be a source of contestation, a little bit of a discomfort that is important to take on this journey. That's the question was, okay, let's do this, but with whom? It took quite a long time to get partners. Access is absolutely difficult in this field. And then the second question was also, how do we actually do this? Because more than being interested in making an installation, I was interested in how do we put our money where our mouth is and make and change collective practices of meaning making and possibly empower others in the process as well. So we developed this format which is called performative ethnography because it invites amateur ethnographers, so you become an ethnographer for 2 hours to visit these spaces where automation of care is taking place or looking at infrastructures. And importantly, during this process, the first step is this initiation, where not only do you pretend to be an ethnographer, but you situate your observation. So you're observing from a perspective, and sometimes these perspectives are very reasonable, like I'm a patient, I am recently retired, I'm an immigrant, and then it can also go to the more imaginative, like I am a model, or I am a dragon, I am a giant. And all of these perspectives are actually very, very valuable. They allow the people observing to put a little bit distance between themselves and their finally ethnographic notes, as well as, it just really brings and drives home the notion of this plurality of perspectives, right? We live in different worlds. So, yeah, that's the performative ethnography, and tomorrow at 10:30 in the Martini Room, we will be showing the document of the performative ethnography that took place on the 7th of February at the University Hospital here in Bonn, meeting Dexter, the surgical robot. So you're all very welcome to come and see the reportage. So the sharing of the field notes. So the participants, the amateur ethnographers, sit down and we record what they basically observed. And then we make a little movie, 17 minutes long, from this as a document. Yeah, so we've been to many places. This first one was associated with AI nosography, so looking in healthcare specifically. And just last week, we also did one in the genetics department of the University Medical Center in Groningen, in the northern Netherlands. So we have Judith and Alice, who will also be presenting a little bit, because we are in a partnership together with this ever-growing community of artists trying to bring other people on board. And finally, or importantly, mapping. it can be a complicated exercise because it immediately unfolds all the presumptions and underlying structures of knowledge, of relations, of community, of worldviews. So I think it's important to engage with mappings of these topics from very different approaches. So this really complicated one was done by Janita Chen, who is actually an intern on the ELSA project. And she's a student of biomedicine, medical sciences in Radboud in Nijmegen. And she has been interviewing people that have been working on the genetics use case. So basically how to develop an AI to help bring next generation sequencing into the workflow of infant screening for rare genetic metabolic diseases. Capiche is at the center. That's the AI. And as soon as she researched and did interviews, the map kept growing and kept expanding, trying to identify all possible actors that are participating in this network. And so upstairs, in the same room as Irakli, you can find this map, which we printed out quite large because we actually used it in a common mapping session where we invited people from the ELSA project to comment on it. So it's an actively changing, adapting map, and it was a really interesting experience. Almost everybody had immediately could identify what was missing, what was wrong, right? So you could see that from this one map, hundreds could be actually made and manifested. And there are also other maps which I present upstairs as well. And this one was done by me and inspired by all the interviews and performative ethnographies and information that I gathered on the question of democratizing robotic surgery or democratizing surgery through the use of surgical robots. And whereas the previous map, I think, carries a little bit of an air of objectivity. We're just listing actors, we're making connections. This one doesn't hold back. It is there to provoke, and it is sort of, yes, a reaction of feeling for the little injustices, the little mistakes, the little presumptions. So, finally, I would invite you all to come upstairs. I will be hopefully hanging out there, and to discuss some of the issues, to comment on the maps. Maybe we can take out a marker and make some further drawings. But in general, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this whole 3 days. Mind-blowing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, both of you. Yeah, you can see what I'm saying, though. It's super interesting to hear from the artists, to talk with the artists, and to listen to it. It's always opens my mind whenever I'm listening to them speak. I love it.